Good morning, everybody. John Sfiocla here for GAI Insights and our morning meeting where we do the Gen AI news briefing for essential, important, and optional news to save you time and to let us have a little bit of fun discussing what's going on in the world of generative AI. Today, we're delighted to have Toby Eduardo Redshaw, my dear friend and advisor to us, a guy I've known forever, one of the most creative, thoughtful IT leaders, has worked in huge jobs inside American Express, Aviva, Federal Express, and others, as well as Verizon's 5G. And just delighted to have Toby here. He's both informed and entertaining. All right, we get the rest of the crew here. And we're going to go ahead and start off. Ankash, why don't you take us to the first article, please? We have Perplexity and our friend Arthur.
Thanks, John.
CEO.
Yeah. So the first one that we have for today comes from Mistral AI. So they have raised $640 million, or they have closed this round of $640 million.
All right. Luda, what do you think here? Essential, important, or optional?
Optional. I think it's great news for Mistral. It's also great vote from many investors to continue to invest in startups at this crazy, in my book, valuations. Mistral is now about $2 billion valuation after this round. And it's a huge list of VCs that invested in this round. With so it's partially $500 million is equity, and the rest is debt. So I think it's great news, but it's optional.
Yeah, I think, Luda, did you say two? I think it's a $6 billion valuation.
6 billion? I'm sorry, I might have too early.
Yeah. Yes. Right. Make sure you have the length of the unicorn's horn long enough here. So we get other folks. What do you think?
Yes,
Optional?
I definitely optional. I think it's interesting to note again, we see lots of co-opetition happening across the ecosystem, right? And two of the investors listed are NVIDIA and IBM, both with competing LLMs, but hedging their bets and investing in a startup that's got some great smaller models that they've built. So the co-opetition continues.
All right.
John, I'd note, I mean, to me, it continues to show that this is a sport of kings, but the game is not over, that the investors are still willing to give a $6 billion valuation, a company that doesn't yet have much revenue. And I think they have 4 step-ups or 3 steps up that were 2 to 3x within 12 months. So it's breathtaking.
Yeah. In the articles at the end of it, right, says, look, this is the round to see whether they can convert that wonderful model into commercial revenue. So it's really a bet that it will happen.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder in some of these things too, if it's not just an alternative to doing R&D on your own P&L. That because the remainder value, let's say that they're unsuccessful in getting commercial customers, I got to believe somebody's going to buy the model, and they're whether they buy it at 6 billion or a billion or whatever. So it's kind of interesting. Unlike some software companies, I think the actual model will be saleable if it's big enough and strong enough.
Well, and that's what I think, John. I mean, we saw when we did our corporate buyers guide last year, and then we're updating this year for the conference, is that this is one of the few, if not the only company is doing both open source and closed source.
Yeah.
So I think one way to hedge that bet is to sell that closed source off as IP.
Yeah, and as Ashish notes in the comments here, the Apple's announcement, I think it's fair to say we're going to see a lot more action out in the small model space and local model as well. All right. So this is optional, interesting, optional, handsome Arthur here. Next.
Hey, I'd add a couple of things to this, right? I think it is optional. I think it's extremely interesting that this is Paris-based, right? President Macron 10 years ago met John Chambers from Cisco and said, hey, if we want to be a fantastic ecosystem for startups, what would we do? And John said, here's the list. It'll take you a decade. And he said, okay, let's go. So they literally have done that. It is a really good ecosystem. And I'd be very interested to see, with all of the government support from their digital ministry that we don't actually do over here, how that company progresses. I also think the second thing is we're coming out of a period where there's very few super top talented people for this domain. And that's going to change over the next year and a half. You'll have a migration of mathematicians from the physics world in. Knowledge graphs look like physics math. You'll also find this technology Legoizing, so you won't really need, the Einsteins to do it. And then typically what happens, wave two innovation in any space after wave one is, the infrastructure and the factory is, 2 to 3 to 4 to 5x better, cheaper, and it kills a lot of wave one. So I'd be interested to see where this goes on both of those categories.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Optional it is. What's next, Akash?
Okay, so the next one comes from Ethan Mollick, and he is discussing the Apple launch yesterday and the business model that Apple might follow, or broader AI businesses might follow going forward.
Yeah, interesting kind of reflection from our friend Ethan. Tobster, what do you think here?
So look, I think this one is essential for about 4 reasons, right? One, it's Apple. You have to pay attention to the combination of these companies, just because of the scale and the intelligence and the penetration across the real world that they have, right? This is the beginning of a journey, and if you're, an individual or in business, a consumer or running a business, you should be paying attention to this. Second thing is, Ethan probably wrote one of the best books in this space, Co-Intelligence, that if you haven't read, you should read it. If he posted something about horse racing, I'd read it and see what he was saying. That the other thing, when I think about this a little longer term, is, life and business happen at the edge. You can plan and you can program and you can try to be preventative and proactive, but the real action is happening at the edge, and all of those things feed the edge. This is essentially an in your hand at the edge of your business approach. And when you think about apps being intelligent across your app domain, that's about component understanding, process and entity relationships. This is now contextual knowledge, right? Knowledge is this value. Contextual knowledge is this value. Being able to respond in smart ways. When I was at Verizon, Kelly Dominguez was this fantastic app that could pre-plan and connect things and see things in email and connect them and pretty much do everything that they're talking about on the personal level, and some of the stuff that Microsoft is talking about. But she was a fantastic EA human being, right? That spent all day doing that. Having the understanding and the context to manage that makes me way more productive. I think the thing that's not called out enough in the article, though, is the impact on efficiency and cycle times, which will change competitive behavior into, if I'm smarter and faster than you, I don't care if we're playing chess or selling cars, I should win that. So I think it's going to change competitive dynamics. And then I think the other thing this is going to do is, I remember when the iPhone originally came out and the CFO of Aviva walked into a meeting and said, "Hey, when are you IT monkeys going to build anything that's even remotely as good as this," right? Zero training footprint, super easy upgrades. The thing doesn't go to sleep for the weekend unless there's an upgrade. And it changed the expectations in business of what effective tools from IT are. This will have the same gravitational pull. Then lastly, the one thing that's buried in here that I think is massively important is this will trigger really smart, intelligent audio assistants. Jack Welch used to have a guy walk behind him everywhere he went. And before he walked into a meeting, they'd whisper, "Hey, you're going to go see John Sviocla. Remember, he's from Boston, was great professor at Harvard, and likes bourbon, right? And the meeting is about this. And oh, by the way, hammer them on slide 6." That sort of ambient intelligence whispering in your ear is almost a hands-free, eyes-free, brains-free augmentation of humans, and I think you'll see that come along. And they have to be careful with privacy and being creepy. A lot of large corporations don't have decent depth on how important that is to Gen Z, which is a segment of the market that'll kill your product if you're not careful. But I mean, John knows Alan Kay, and it has this great saying, context is worth 80 IQ points. This whole thing is making your context intelligent. So I think it's absolutely essential to read through this. It's a quick article, but I think it's very very prescient.
All right, so we have a impassioned case for essential. Adam, you rated it optional.
I don't know. Toby makes a lot of really good points. I certainly have upgraded to important as a result. I think it is a short read, and it does cover a lot of different components of the landscape. I felt that for an AI leader, there wouldn't actually be that much new information in this article. I think Ethan does a good job of presenting it, and it is probably worthwhile for someone to take pause and consider. But I'm not sure I'd consider it essential. What's happening is essential. I would agree. I'm not sure this article from Ethan would be considered essential news.
Yeah, I was also in the important camp. I think it is the thought-provoking article, and Toby, you certainly make a lot of points, but they're not in the article. They are the thoughts that you had when you read this article, and those are really very, very future embracing thoughts, right? So I think it is an important read. I'm not sure I'm in essential camp.
Yeah, Michael
Yeah,
Novak.
look, I'd actually agree with that. I don't think you're going to get a bunch of information that you didn't really have, or I couldn't have teased out of you if I asked you the right questions. What I think this does is puts a spotlight on one of the most important journeys and influences in this space and triggers questions. I mean, when was the last time you read an article and started thinking about the business model impacts of this?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I think that his whole notion of, hey, the general models put the onus on the individual to figure out what they're good for. These are more like appliances that are face valid. I started out at optional. I don't know. I'm starting to lean toward essential here. Michael Novak says, look, are we going to become too, complacent businesses and overly reliant on AI? I don't think so, Michael, any more than that we do on our other tools and so forth, but we shall see. I'm going to go ahead and rate this bad boy essential. All right, let's force our ad lead to read something here. Next.
Okay, the next one comes from Perplexity, and it relates to an article that Perplexity published, which was taken from Forbes, and Forbes has commented why this cynical theft represents everything that could go wrong with AI.
Yes, our friend Randall Lane from Forbes, who we met as we're helping out with the AI event at MIT that he talks about here. So, not Paul. David.
This one was me. Yes, and if you scroll up, Ankaj, you can see a picture of the stage there at the conference that we were at in MIT. So this article talks about Perplexity's newsletter, basically, to which I'm a subscriber, by the way. I'm a Perplexity user. And what they've done with their newsletter is actually really smart. They basically create a page, and remember, we talked about this a few weeks ago, that Pages is a new function in Perplexity where you can basically customize a web page with research that you've done. And it's what's happened here is that Perplexity sent one of those out, and it was largely based on a story that was reported on from Forbes, and just the day before, apparently. And in the newsletter, a lot of the language apparently was straight pickup from the Forbes article, and Forbes didn't like that. And actually, Perplexity got much more traffic to their version because once they create these pages and send them in the newsletter, they also get published to the web and they're crawlable by search engines. So they started getting more hits than Forbes on the content. So clearly, Forbes was pissed off, and this is a very scathing response to that. Now, Perplexity does put citations on the content most of the time. Forbes argues that they're too tiny. I would argue that if you wrote a research report and you cited a source, you put a footnote on it, right? They put a footnote on it. It's actually got a little icon that shows the firm's logo from which the content came. Now, I think they have a legitimate right that some of the content is not cited. When they put a summary at the top of the page, they do not have a citation on it. As I read this, I'm a journalist by trade, though I've spent most of my career in what I'd call corporate journalism. So I went back and forth on the gripe on this a few times before I settled on. I think Forbes is not quite understanding what the purpose of Perplexity is, which is a search engine, just like Google. It's going to put up results, except it's putting in some words from the results. They should be cited. As I read this, I thought the simple, solution here is put a citation on that initial summary, or, don't use it, or put quotes around it, something like that, right? Because it's a research report. So, anyways, it was an interesting article for me to read as a journalist or by trade. I would mark it optional. We know that this functionality is here. We know that search is being reinvented, and this is one of the ways it's happening. And you could read other articles to learn about those. But it definitely was interesting. I'm curious to see what other people thought about the argument that Forbes had on this matter.
Yeah, I found it just sloppy from a Perplexity standpoint. I thought Forbes had a reasonable grievance, but optional. Yet another example of how a large language model overstepped itself. I don't know if other folks anything big on this. We've got another couple to go here.
Yeah, optional.
Optional. All right, optional it is. Ankaj, next.
Okay, the next one is a research paper which talks about self-tuning. So basically, how LLMs can acquire new knowledge through self-teaching.
Luda, what do you think here? We got our friend, the Feynman technique, which I had to look up, which I thought was kind of cool, about explaining things to a kid. So,
yeah, it's research. It's early days. I rate it as optional. However, I really think that this is a tremendous step in the right direction. So what they've noticed that if you work with LLM, different LLMs do it differently. It has difficulty remembering what already has been stored, what you've taught it, right? So they went at teaching LLM in this self-tuning way, and this figure on the right, maybe Ankash, you can make it a little bigger. It shows how they did it, with essentially how humans do the learning, memorization, then comprehension, and then working with it, right? Reflection. So and you see the results on the right. The first graph, this is the big impact. So they got the LLM to remember what the prior knowledge was and do better reasoning with this method of getting the new knowledge, right? So it's a tremendous step in the right direction of getting LLMs to do more broad reasoning and broader tasks, but optional for me.
All right.
One quick comment I have. I was at MIT last week, and they had a session where a professor was interviewing an AI, talking about consciousness, and the robot was saying, "Well, I'm only conscious right now because of what I learned. The way I could be much better is if you stop training me on other large language models, because we're going to have mad cow disease and data, and I really need to be embodied in the physical." Machine, so I can understand the physical world. So it's actually making an argument for putting in the robot, which I thought was very interesting.
Fascinating. Other folks.
Look, I think this is, I think I agree with the rating on this one. I think it's just another example of how fast this space will change and how you'll find architectural and software approaches to make all of this an order of magnitude faster, better, cheaper. And then not for today's discussion, but extrapolate that for 5 years. Yeah. What does this do 5 years out, right? That should concern you.
Right. And for that matter, Ashish makes a good point. Maybe we rate it important to just flag that this type of models, the models and underlying models will change over time with this type of techniques added to them, right? So it is important to know, but it's so early, Ashish. So that's why I put it optional.
A guy at MIT taught his platform pretty much as much semantic knowledge and manipulation as the large models by having it read 1,500 children's books.
Wow.
And the interesting thing is 800 of those he generated himself.
Wow. Yeah, I think Ashish's point about, the self-learning and so forth and the performance, at least in the paper, and I think the nature of the structure of how it teaches itself, the different techniques it uses, like, in terms of multiple choice questions, doing summarization, and then the retrieval of existing knowledge, kind of increasing long-term memory, if you will, if you want to use that analogy. Yeah, I think that is an important thing, and this is a clear and present concern, right? How do I keep this thing up to date, and how do I make sure I don't get model drift, and I can't get access to the knowledge that's already been put into the model, and this addresses both of those pretty directly. So I think we're going to go for the big I on this one.
I was just going to try to push you there, John. I feel like we always include a couple of research articles throughout the week, and a lot of them are interesting, but they seem far off. But yesterday's and today's really piqued my attention. I think they're ones that we're going to see more of these techniques going forward. They look super promising.
I agree. Good
I think
point.
pretty well written paper too. Some of these research papers are, written like Boston street signs. Boston street signs work when you already know where you're going. It's kind of the same thing in some of these research papers, but this is actually
I agree.
All right, next.
Okay. The next one comes from Bessemer Venture Partners, and they have written quite a detailed article about how the AI infrastructure stack should look like.
Tobes, what do you think here?
I rank this one optional. I think, you take a glance at the chart from across the room. Big fan of the Bessemer folks, right? They're one of the top folks in infrastructure. And basically, there's only two things in here that jump out to me, which is one, look, there's a ton of work going on to the point we just made, right? They show how many papers are being written. So there's so much attention by so many smart people. And then this is the thing you should look at from across the room. And the conclusion is, wow, super busy, lots of money going to there, lots of folks making bets. That's a cauldron for big change and big progress, and a lot of these being left behind. But that's an investor's view, right? I don't think it's super useful to think of this in a tech stack model anymore. I think when you're thinking about supply chain systems or CRM systems, sure, think about the tech stack. But I think this new technology, this new sort of wave we're on, it's about, to use Ethan's term, it's about co-intelligence. It's about ingesting knowledge. It's about RAG and RAW, supporting LLMs. And that is more of a process flow, generative model, if you will, rather than here's the stack, right? And I could look at that stack in 3 months and, a third of it'll be different. So the bottom line out of there is a lot of investment going in, a lot of complexity, a lot of research going to accelerate the changes there. But unless you're, an investor in this, or, an architect inside a big company working on target architecture, but that map you can get from, 20 places.
If you're gonna scan that map quickly from across the room, you better blow it up into a big poster and put it on the wall. My God, that is a crowded map.
Yeah, well, I mean that's what you're not really going to do anything with the knowledge on the map except to know, wow, this is really complicated and there's lots of stuff. So if I'm going to go make a purchasing decision or an architectural decision or an engagement decision or a research decision, you've then got to go somewhere else and go way deeper, right? The poster is a
Yeah, I saw some importance. I saw some importance in our spreadsheet. Who was, I think, John or Adam? You may have rated it.
We both did. Yes, we need to be a little bit mindful on time. We're coming in down to about 4 minutes here to go. So I'm happy to make the case for important. Adam,
go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think it was a decent categorization about what's going on in the different layers and what the value add is. I thought it was a good synopsis of not just the market map, but kind of how to think about different parts of it without weighing in too much on things they'd either invested in or thought were good. So I thought it was important to understand the current state of the stack. There's a lot going on, and I kind of like this market map, so that's why I rated it important.
Yeah, I will agree with important as an investor. Remember, this whole wave is supported by a lot of investors. Yeah. And I think it is important that it is certainly not the IT stack, but it is a very good article overlaying how it is working from the investor point of view. So I think it is important.
Yeah, I agree with Lucinda. It'd be good to have this thing, based on market share or investment or some, dimension of size. Not the ants and the elephants are together here on this map. All right.
I'd argue with myself on that one, right? I'd agree with you in that one of the big things leaders have to know about is what is the land of what's possible with this new tech. And when you look at this structure, you will have thoughts about possibilities that you weren't even thinking about. So,
all right. So we're back to important. Coming up. Go ahead.
I'll just add, it's worth noting there is that 1, 2, 3, 4, the sections under that map that actually goes pretty deep and insightful and offers a really broad perspective that can get people up to speed on a lot of these things really quickly. Yeah. So that was my justification, was beyond the market map for sure.
Awesome. All righty. Important it is. We got about a minute and a half here to make it to 30 minutes. Keep going. Akash.
The next one comes from Perplexity and Lenny. So he highlights how product managers can use Perplexity in their PM work.
All right, David, bring us home with a
All right, I'm the Perplexity guy today. I'm going to put an optional on this. It's an article that gives a bunch of different ways that product managers are using Perplexity. And then obviously, if you're a product manager and you're not using it, you can get some great ideas. There's specific prompts in here to show you the art of the possible. If you could go to the chart that shows PM usage from Lenny's informal poll, he polled about 6,000 PMs. I think it's further up.
Yeah, there we go.
And 57% say they use it on a daily basis.
Pretty amazing.
It's a really great research tool if you're looking at the competitive landscape, if you're trying to understand the business models of competitors, etc. I love this tool. As I said, I use it all the time. Not an important article, but interesting to see the uptake high there in the product management space, and still sticking with optional on it though.
All righty, we got an optional. Anybody going to make an argument for escalation here? We're going to DEFCON 2 or 3? No? All right.
I said this to 20 product managers and product dev leads going, look, this is going to be really handy
Yes.
for you. But yeah, I'd agree. I think the big thing it misses is, and I've had those groups since like 1986 when I ran customer automation for FedEx and had all the product dev and the product management. The biggest problem in all of them my entire career is they suck at program management, and that's not mentioned in there at all.
It's funny. Well, you're throwing some shade at him. Michael Novak's throwing shade at the PMs, saying that good for them. Not many big words. So, all right. But I do think that this notion of it's kind of I think it is a reinvention of the FAQs. I think now is the time for companies and individuals to build a brand. To just like in the early days, I think people built brands around websites or blogs. I think that today, if you do one of these things, you have an opportunity to build a brand for you as an individual or for your company. All right, so here we are. We got one essential with Apple's AI. Again, Apple's essential self-tuning, road mapping, and Paris-based Mistral at self-tuning and road mapping as important and the rest as optional. All right. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Anything else from our folks urgent? All right. Or important? Again, thank you, Toby. Great to have you here. Hope to get you back here again. And everybody have a good day. And we'll see you all tomorrow morning, bright and early or late, depending upon where you are on the planet. Bye-bye now.